Okay, well, it's good to see you again and to be able to have this conversation with you, especially after doing something similar with the Amazing Blood Mirror Project, trying to shed light on some of the really draconian laws and policies out there that are limiting people's ability to lead, right? Um, when I think about what's going on right now with COVID-19, it just gets me, worried about this long-standing idea that for you to be able to change laws and policies, you need a long-term strategy, you need a long-term approach, because it takes a while for policymakers to see things differently, especially when it comes to laws and policies that are kind of etched in stone or a part of society. And so COVID-19 has shown us that that's not the case, right? Like we can respond abruptly, we can respond sooner, we can, change our ideas and beliefs and then to be able to help others who are vulnerable. And we've seen that happen globally around the world. But then I think along those lines, then I think about this FDA blood donation ban from gay and bisexual men in the U.S. and brings me to think about your project would speak to the same issue. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about this.
Well, first, I think it's really unfortunate that it's taken a global pandemic for the FDA to even make changes that they could have made years ago. I mean, at the time we started this project, it was 2015. The FDA had just moved from a lifetime ban to the 1-year ban on celibacy. And that's what we were addressing with Blood Mirror. And that was discriminatory because FDA policy for blood donation should not be based on gender or sexual orientation. It should be based on individual behavior. And that's always the way it should be. And so we've been in talks with the FDA for a few years now. There was the Blood Equality campaign, the Blood Equality Medical Advisory Board. People are engaged in this issue from across many parts of the country. And there are talks about how to reduce the policy, to reduce the current policy. And then all of a sudden we have a global pandemic and the FDA makes this quick change because in part, I think the United Kingdom, they moved to a 3-month deferral period back in 2017. So the FDA maybe has something to look at or compare to based on the United Kingdom. But even the UK, when they made that change, it's not based on science. It's 3 months is completely arbitrary.
Right.
And so the FDA is doing that. It sounds, again, like, what a great idea, what a step in the right direction. But a step that still comes with discrimination is not a step in the right direction. It's just another discriminatory policy.
Right.
3 months is, you just pull that out of thin air. Doesn't come with anything, in my opinion.
No, you're right. I mean, let's think about it a bit more in terms of the science, right? We know that blood being donated is being screened. It really shouldn't matter, sexual preference, right? Because that's not based on the science. That's honestly tied to stigma because there's still this homophobia that inherently tie into the fabric of a society, right? And our law policies are intrinsically tied to some of these homophobic ideals that are not, pro hetero, whatever. And so I'm just, it's 3 months. It's not just blood, but also plasma donation. And we're seeing that there a lot of people are beating the virus of COVID-19. And hopefully that their blood and their plasma could be used to save other people who are struggling with this virus.
Absolutely.
But because it's in this law or policy, I mean, that's not happening. And so, thousands of people are struggling with this every day. What is it going to take for them to realize that this is just not fair?
Well, first of all, this always comes down to a question of honesty, right? An individual can lie. This is not, so there's an honor system when you're donating blood to begin with. So with that as the overall umbrella of needing to trust your citizens, why not just develop a policy that is rooted in science?
Right.
But I do think what you say about, this deep-rooted homophobia and AIDS phobia does still dictate about a lot of how the decision makers are going about thinking about policy for this issue.
Right. And you just bring up the point I was going to make. It's obviously tied to the HIV, epidemic back in the day, right? Like this
Well, the
laws.
policy was put into place because of the AIDS
Right.
epidemic in 1983.
Right. And today, even though we are managing the HIV fairly well around the world, even better in the US, we still have this laws that, again, policy that's tied to something that happened in 1983. That's just archaic and ridiculous, I would say.
Well, it also continues to perpetuate stigma, both about being gay and having sex with another man, and also what the nature of HIV and AIDS are in 2020, which is, on some levels, very different than it was in 1983.
Right.
So, I don't know, it just seems to me that the FDA could do a lot better. There are a lot of things that I wish that the FDA would implement. I understand it's going to be challenging at first, and it might even be expensive, but it just doesn't seem logical to me that when someone goes to donate blood, they don't just do immediately an HIV rapid test. It's not going to be completely 100% foolproof, but it will give some indication of that person's status at the moment they're going to give blood. And the upside is if a person going to donate blood most likely believes that they're HIV negative and wanting to donate blood to help save lives. So should that person go and it turns out they are positive, what a great thing. You're able to help that person find the treatment and care that they need on the spot, as well as even add another layer of protection to the blood supply. But a lot of the blood centers don't want to have to deal with the cost of a rapid test or have to train their employees to deal with providing services. I mean, there's a lot of issues as to why that hypothetically can't be implemented. But really, it's like, what's the value and cost of human lives? We're finding that out right now.
Right.
What's the value of blood? It turns out that when there's a global pandemic and blood centers across the country are being shut down, all of a sudden gay blood is, wow, we'll take your gay blood if you're celibate for 3 months.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing that kind of pisses me off in this particular moment in time, is that we shouldn't actually have a blood shortage. There's no reason to have a blood shortage. There's plenty of heterosexuals in the United States of America with blood. If they chose to donate their blood, we wouldn't have a blood shortage. So now all of a sudden we're turning to the gays and saying, God, we really need your blood now. And you're probably not going to have sex anyway because you're isolating at home. So now you're celibate for 3 months. Donate your blood.
Right. The hypocrisy.
I don't know how I feel about that. On some level, I don't know if I'm going to donate my blood after 3 months of celibacy. I don't feel like I want to donate my blood under a policy that still labels me as diseased and is discriminatory. I want to participate in my civic duty, but in the context of a fair and equitable system, which it is not right now.
Absolutely. Well, this is amazing. Thanks. I think you hit the nail on the head when you say a policy that labels you as diseased. I mean, that's just unfounded and unfair. And just hopefully, the FDA will start to consider, adjusting or making changes that will, eventually save more lives and be more fair to everyone and treat everyone.
I hope so. I mean, I think that there is enough science out there already. And I mean, even like the Department of Health of New York, major Department of Health across the country are advocating for a more fair policy that's based on individual screening assessments versus blanket discriminatory policies. And I just don't know what it's going to, I mean, it's almost like if it took a freaking global pandemic to get them to still create a discriminatory policy, what more what is it going to take to get the FDA to actually do this within the realm of science? We
Good
shall
question.
find out. I hope that they do make that change, because beyond saving lives, it's also about equality within our society.
Right. So, do you want to talk a bit more about your project that you, behind us?
Well, what's behind me is sculptures that are made with blood preserved inside of plexiglass. It's sort of, that was a piece that was made in 2011. It was a sculptural study, in a way, that Blood Mirror was based off of. You know, the construction, you know, having made these works sort of prepared me for the construction of Blood Mirror.
Mhm.
Maybe you want to talk about your participation in the project.
I mean,
Thank you again for donating your blood, Oliver.
of course. I mean, here's the thing, as a migrant person who, there are lots of people like me who are dealing or experiencing COVID differently, right? And when we think about how our government was responding, particularly for people who are undocumented, I think that everyone who's considered undocumented is put into one box when it's it's not homogeneous. Like, people who are considered undocumented vary, right? So there are people who are going through the asylum system now, who are legally allowed to work, who are legally allowed to pay taxes, but are still considered undocumented. And so those people cannot access the financial assistance that's made available. Access to healthcare, time like this, where everyone needs to be able to access testing and afford testing. Speak to a provider or a therapist to be able to manage this. The crisis that we're all living in. Those issues are very real for people in my community. And so the pressure from society to say, especially this harmful narrative that migrants are takers, right? They're here to take from you. Whereas the reality is that most of us are given back to this new home that we're in, right? Like, again, we're taxpayers, we're employers of labor. We contribute to the growth community. And in my case, want to give blood, right? To be able to save the life of my neighbor who's struggling with COVID-19, and having to hear that my blood is diseased or is not welcome. That's like a double-sided, like, we want you to give, but we will not take. And to me, that is, in the simplest way, problematic. Just put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what bothers me with all of this right now. Yeah.
It's very, very well said.
Well, anyways, well, thank you again, Jordan. I hope that we can all continue this talk and continue to walk the walk, because it is really important that we're not short of blood. People are treated equitably, like everyone is respected regardless of their sexual orientation, and that our laws and policies are based off of science and not stigma, discrimination.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Stay well, Oliver.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Take
Hang
care.
on. No.